we adhere to the 12-step program. Not all of the people, but a very high percentage of the people succeed in overcoming lifelong difficulties. And so thus, adherence to 12 steps improves quality of life and removes us from the dungeons of drug addiction or addiction in general. The point I'm trying to make here as a secondary piece of literature, not a secondary, as the core piece of literature that is the foundation for the 12-step program that has actually proven much better results for a longer time is actually the Bible and the adherence to it. The reason I wanted to mention it is because I saw my older brother's friend at the gym last night, and he's a friend of mine, of course, now that I'm an adult, but he's seen me grow up. And I found myself explaining my story and my journey up until this point in my life through the difficulties that I've had. And he's like, how did you, he watches my content and the sort of things I talk about, and like, what made you choose like God and his path and the Torah, like out of all of this chaos? And I was like, well, the adherence of it saved my life and continuously blesses my days. And so why in the world wouldn't I continue to do that if it works at least just for me? But I'd like to kind of broaden the idea that this has worked for far more than just me. If you see the story of the Bible as a historical piece, then you're looking at Adam and Eve living in a paradise to which they themselves destroyed it and were cursed. Well, they had consequences to their actions, right? And we as mankind suffer based on that foundational issue, to a transition of mankind being evil, but Noah adhering to the law and following God and not being like everybody else. And Noah was the only person, him and his family, to restart civilization. And then it jumps to Abraham, who is in a repopulated history 400-ish years beyond Noah. And he's living in a clearly sinful world. His wife is getting taken by pharaohs. There's Sodom and Gomorrah. Post-Noah, there's the Tower of Babel. Yet Abraham finds favor in the eyes of God, and his adherence to the law gets him a promise from God, and anyone who is being around him is being blessed. Those who curse him will be cursed, and those who bless him will be blessed. And that happens in the story. He's a childless man with his wife, and they raise over 300 souls in their home. He is also a fierce warrior as well, as in there's 4 kings against 5 kings, and the 4 kings beat the 5 kings, and the 5 kings are hiding away, and Abraham with his 300, you could say slaves, or you could say guerrilla warfare students, or people raised in his home, it's probably a combination of all 3 realistically, was able to beat back the 4 kings that beat the 5 kings all the way to the other side of Israel, essentially. So a long battle, and he would hit them at night, right? And when he's asked by the king, oh, you are Abraham, you are obviously in contact with the God Most High. People know who God is, by the way. He's not specific to anybody, right? As in there is a priest of the Most High acknowledging that Abraham is loved by God. And Abraham's response to the whole thing, which is, look, we'll let you keep all the wealth, just give us the people back. And Abraham's response is, no, I am but like a shoe strap to God's shoe, right? As in I'm a nothing, right? This is God's glory. And just in case anybody wanted to take credit for what just happened, I'm not going to take any of those things. Just pay my men for the work that they did. And then he essentially walks away from the whole thing. And then you have the story of Isaac. Isaac is blessed by God the whole way through. His father was Abraham. He was taught the law. He got a beautiful and righteous wife. Yes, his mother passed. Yes, he was 40 years old before he got married. He did live very, very late into his second century of life. And he was tremendously blessed with very little war and toil, fortunately. And he was so great in the land of Egypt that they basically banished him because there was like no more wealth for the Egyptians, and they were stealing his wells, and there was all these problems. But ultimately, he's a giant success story, right? And then he has two children, twins, which are essentially the fathers of nations in many ways. Israel literally being the Israel, the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, right, come through Jacob, right, before he gets that name Israel. And his brother Esav is a hugely powerful, seems to be war-mongrel and some, as they reconnect at some point in their life, as he's on the run from his brother, but yet he becomes hugely successful in his father's-in-law's home, who completely mistreats him in every regard. And he has success in all aspects of life, even though things are very difficult. So it's not to say that life isn't going to be difficult anymore. It's going to be difficult. It's just, it can be blessed. It can be headed in a right direction. Now, same thing with Yosef. And then we're kind of like, well, there's these figures that continuously adhere to the law and they get blessing and protection, but it actually ends up extending to a whole nation. And that nation ends up being the children of Israel, who was born in Egypt. They were enslaved for 400 years, but God took them out of Egypt with a strong hand, and he performed miracles. There was the splitting of the sea. There was the giving of the Torah, the document as to how do we really adhere to God. So God put that out in literature and gave it to people. And 1,500 years from that point, where the Jews maintained the land of Israel, that was given out to all of the nations through the story of Christ. And so you have these Jewish prophets giving this foundational literature to the world, just like in the addiction space, we give the 12-step program to people to get out of addiction. There is a more important piece of literature that actually gives people the guidelines for life, how to live it blessed, not that it won't be hard anymore, but how to get the best possible scenario out of life. And it's been proven. I'm personally a living example of it, but I know many people out there have that feeling. And in this day and age, we're completely void of morality. And so we're experiencing the consequences of thus. And I believe we need to revert back to that adherence in order to reap those blessings. So that's my speech for the day. And try and equip yourself, if you're dealing with addiction, with the 12-step program. And more importantly, equip yourself with the wisdom and the adherence of the Bible so that you can have God's blessing, because he's the one who's going to take you through the 12-step program as well.
I don't usually write notes, and I'm glad I did, because what Dan said was so comprehensive. There's really not any reason to say anything. But in just the interest of human interaction, there was a young man that came to our house on Friday night, and he was just talking. He's a smart guy, well-read, and he was outlining some of the principles of he brought up as example the Taoist symbol of the yin and the yang, which is, if you describe it as a symbol, it's like the male and female aspects of physical existence are represented inside a circle, and they fit each other purposely. And so it's a symbol of cause and effect. And it's interesting that what came to mind, because I'm all for, there's nothing in Taoism that I don't think describes the reality of existence on the planet Earth to some extent, but it's limited. It's prescribed within the circle which represents the universe. So the universe, I'm familiar with this because I was a martial arts guy, and the system I was in the longest was Ishin-Ryu karate, and their symbol was the Tao and the yin and the yang thing of Ishin-Ryu, which means one heart way. But that's just a little color. The reason I'm sharing it is that it prescribes the nature of existence on the planet Earth, but the biblical view is larger than that. It's totally existential. It covers everything. So the universe, the entire universe, is just a thing inside the creation of God, you know. And so that's just to refer to what Dan was talking about in summarizing excellently the key personalities of the Bible, the biblical corpus. And there's things that come to mind. There are limited truths that are true, but they're not comprehensively true. Like you've heard phrase like the law of the jungle, right? Darwinist ideas called survival of the fittest. These are phrases we're familiar with. Might makes right. How about that? The strong do what they will. The weak do what they must. Accurate descriptions of things, you know. But it's not comprehensive because the human condition and the marching orders that God gave to mankind, remembering that in the text of the 5 books of Moses, only, specifically the book of Genesis, only man is made in the image of God. So there's a comprehensive view of what existence is that's in the biblical narrative that is not included in all of the religions, although I will say that virtually all religions will have some aspect of truth. And insofar as those things are true, just like if you're in the jungle, the law of the jungle operates. Do you follow? But there's a larger world, and there's levels of existence. So we can't be strong enough to emphasize that people get familiar with the 5 books of Moses, because it's the opening of the Bible. In the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth, and it tells the narrative of existence and the nature of existence, through which the larger biblical corpus of the Old Testament, which are the books of the prophets, stories of men like Yiftach or King David, or Joshua, of course, following Moses, David, Solomon, extraordinary stories of like Samson, and right until the time where you enter the world and where Jesus, another Jew, is born in the land of Judea. And then, that is, as Dan said, that becomes the instrument, that reservoir of thought that's connected to and points constantly to the opening, the 5 books. That's what you want to run with. You should read it all, but it's going to be helpful if you read it from the beginning. And if you read those 5 books, you have the key of understanding of what is being talked about. Jesus is almost always, when he says, and they attribute, the book of Matthew says, Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. That's correct. Jesus said it in the gospel, except that he's quoting what was said in the 5 books of Moses. Love thy neighbor himself is explicit words precisely from the Old Testament. So it's the way of understanding everything and the way of understanding reality. And the reason to do it is simply that you can have a really hard, life is going to be challenging, and it can be challenging with curses until death, and perhaps that ends everything, or it can be challenging with blessings in an upward spiral, potentially unto eternal life. I think we all know which one we'd pick. And those who have picked that have been part of civilization. And when you don't pick that, you become destroyers of civilization. And that's, I guess we know what our marching orders are. Once again, to summarize the book of Deuteronomy, Moses says, I set before you the good and the life and the evil and the death. Choose life that you may live. That's it. I don't want to water down what Dan said, so I'm going to not talk too much today. That's it. Okay, go ahead, Israel.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. The 10th commandment is do not covet. And it's very interesting because all the commandments are actionable. There's this one God, don't bow down to idols, do not murder, do not steal, do not commit adultery. It's very specific, very action-based. But then the 10th commandment, and very often the final commandment is the last word, it's a commandment regarding thought and regarding feelings, which is do not covet, do not desire something that doesn't belong to you. You see your fellow's wife, you see your fellow's car, you see your fellow's house, do not desire it. And that's something that's very interesting. It introduces us to another perspective here, because people think biblically it's just pretty clear cut, do this, don't do that, and game over. But it's not like that, because so much of our responsibilities are internal as well. In fact, when you read the conclusion of the Torah, and this follows through the rest of the Bible, as the prophets are telling the people, return to God, heart and soul. There's something that has to happen here that's beyond just action, because you can follow all the rules, and you need to follow all the rules. But is that enough? No, it's not, because you need to get in touch with what's going on inside of you. As we discussed, human beings are created in the image of God. If you come into contact with who you really are, you're coming into contact with God himself. And that's something that you need to do as part of your return to God. And it's a huge part. It comes into circumcision of the heart. This idea that you have to cut away the excess that's blocking you from God and get to the bottom of what's going on inside of you. So that leads me to what I wanted to talk about, which is the idea of thoughts. And it's something I've been thinking about, which is, we all have thoughts in our head, and not all of our thoughts are very positive. And this idea that the Torah is teaching us is like, you have to make sure that your internal world reflects your external world. You have to make sure that the things that are going on in your head and going on in your heart are actually a reflection of who you are and what God wants you to be doing. And, we're in a space here to talk about addiction as well. That's also how addiction functions too, is people get in their head and then they start obsessing over things and they're like, what if I do it? What if I do it? And then they end up doing it, right? And so much of what leads us to the bad behavior is the bad thoughts that precede that behavior. And as you obsess over the wrong things, you end up actually doing them. So this is something we have to take stock of and actually be serious about, because it matters. It matters what we think and what we feel. And if we want to be really in touch with our soul, we have to look inwards. So I came up with a 4-step process to deal with, say, bad thoughts. Or if you find yourself experiencing destructive thoughts, follow these 4 steps and it should work. The first step is self-talk. The second step is allow yourself to be analyzed by someone that you trust. Allow someone you trust to analyze you. Step 3 is don't dwell on it too much. Let it go. And step 4 is be productive and stay busy. And I'll go through each one of those steps. So the first one is self-talk. And self-talk is very important. People underestimate it. You think, that's kind of stupid, repeating some mantra or affirmations, speaking to yourself. But it's actually very important, because at the end of the day, you're the one who's the victim of your own brain, and you have to deal with yourself 24/7. And what do you do when you're in your head and you're thinking? You have to work these things through. It's not enough just to let yourself be assaulted by all of these thoughts and all of these destructive ideas and just let it take over you. You have to talk back. You have to create order in all of these thoughts, and tell yourself truths. Tell yourself what the reality is. Very often, people fall into despair. They fall into addictive fantasies. They fall into sexually perverse fantasies. And what is the solution? The solution is talk yourself through it. Remind yourself who you are, what you are as a human being. Why are you here? What's your job? What's really your goal? As Mr. Moses said, we want life. We want eternal blessing. So what are going to be the steps that take you towards that eternal blessing? What are going to be the things that actually help you? And you have to talk yourself through that deeply and honestly as you understand what your struggles are. But you also need to realize that knowing the truth and speaking positive truths to yourself can actually walk you through that process. And step 2 is allow yourself to be analyzed by someone you trust. And this is a moment of enlightenment I had on Friday night with my wife, actually, which is that we were discussing things, and I was going through something, and she was going through something. And at one point, we realized that what I was going through, she was able to see clearly on me and tell me what I needed to hear, even though I couldn't see it myself. And what she was going through, I could see clearly, and I was able to tell her like how I saw it, and that resonated with her as well. And I realized that God is a genius. Like he created man, and then he said, it's not good for man to be alone. And so he created someone opposite you who can help you to see you, because you can't see yourself. And that's quite literally the case. Human beings cannot see themselves. I mean, unless you look in a reflection in the water, or you look in the mirror. Now we have cameras, but we can't see ourselves, but we can see other people. We can see each other. So there's something so interconnected about this life that God says it's not enough for you just to be with yourself, because you can't even truly see yourself. You need someone else to see you, and they need you to see them. And that's mirrored in the relationship between a man and a woman, but even just between friends and between people that you trust, between family members. If you have someone who you trust, that they see you for who you are, and they can give you the wisdom that you need to hear, it's actually very helpful to enter into honest conversation with another person. And the third thing is, don't dwell on it. And this is kind of the balancing act here, because on the one hand, thoughts and feelings are so important, but on the other hand, as it says in Numbers chapter 15, don't pursue after your heart and your eyes, because your heart and your eyes are not actually the truth. Like what your perceptions, your feelings, your emotions, it's not really the truth. And what you'd be better off doing is following the commandments of God. It's following the law, as Noah did, as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob did, as Moses taught Israel, and as all the prophets taught mankind. Don't focus on your own ideas. Don't go down the rabbit hole of your own destructive ideologies and perceptions, but rather center yourself and remember, it's just a thought. There's a great psychologist of our time, Dr. Jordan Peterson. He has a wonderful line. He says, let your thoughts die so you don't have to. Right? We're all so preoccupied with our thoughts. We also live in a time where people identify with their thoughts and feelings. I feel this way, therefore I am this way. That's not true. Just because you have a lust or a thought or an emotion or a feeling, it doesn't mean that you now have to go pursue that, or you are not, you are that. You're not that. And there's this phrase that only sounds good in a British accent: perish the thought. Right? Like, just let the thought perish, let it die, because it's not you. And if you let your thoughts die, if they need to die, then you'll be able to live on, because these are just temporary things. And it shows you the spectrum of yourself, of your brain's capacity, where your mind can go to the darkest place, but it could also go to the lightest place. And there's so much vastness in that spectrum of existence that, if anything, we should just accept it. Like dreams are that way as well, where you go to sleep and then suddenly you start seeing some of the most grotesque, gruesome images, or some of the most beautiful, wonderful visions. So existence is very vast, and there's so much to be found there. So if we get too caught up on one thought or one association or one feeling, that's also not good. So while it is important, don't dwell on it too much. Don't give it too much weight. Put it in its rightful place and let it pass, because it'll pass. You can think in your own life, something that you were preoccupied with 10 years ago now is like a distant memory, like it just never even happened. So that's one of the stories of King Solomon. I don't even think it's in the Bible. It's like a legend that King Solomon asked a man to get him like a great gift, and he got him a ring that said, "This too shall pass." And that was like Solomon's consolation in life, that like it's going to be okay, And the fourth thing is be productive and stay busy, because that's really what it comes down to. Is like when people have too much time on their hands, they don't have enough purpose in their life. They end up, getting into their head. They get into their desires, and they start to fall. So it's very important that we stay on top of our game. We stay active and productive in life. When Dan was talking about it on Friday night, he said, I used to be a non-functioning depressed person, then I became a functioning depressed person, and now I'm not depressed and I'm functioning. So the way to pull yourself out of depression, the way to pull yourself out of the pit of despair, of the thoughts clouding your mind, is to simply start being productive and start doing the right thing. And through positive action, through actually pulling yourself up, getting out of bed, doing the thing that you don't want to do but you have to do, that discipline will free your mind as well. And it'll make you stronger in every way. It'll fortify you mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. So I just wanted to discuss that. I think it's useful advice for all of us as we deal with our internal world, which is so much of who we are, and so much of what we need to focus on, because that is the substance of life. There's all the things that we do, but there's also the experiences that go on within And it serves us to have an understanding of that and to have clarity on that and to have the ability to find inner strength as well as outer strength. And so I'll leave you with a verse from the Proverbs, which says, he that rules his spirit is as strong as someone who conquers a city. So if you can rule over your spirit and your own personality and your own inner world, it's like you're like a mighty warrior who can conquer a whole city.
Hang on, just wanted to throw up something if it can track what I was saying and what Dan and Israel were saying. That God is love, but God is a lot of other things too. So I'm just going to quote the words of the prophet Hosea, and it's in Hebrew. It's just showing off, just so that we have some credibility. Ve'erashtik li leolam, ve'erashtik li betzedek uvmishpat uvhesed uvrachamim, ve'erashtik li be'emuna ve'yada'at et Adonai. And those are the quotations at the end of the book of Hosea. And it says, I betroth myself to you, as though God is speaking, ve'erashtik le'olam, forever, with righteousness, with mishpat, with justice, with hesed, with kindness, with rachamim, with compassion, and with emunah, as faithfulness. That's a comprehensive, you're getting much more comprehensive. And the list is longer than that, of course, because God is everything. God is power. God is love. God is justice. So we shouldn't be limited. And that doesn't diminish in any way the infinite love that God is, because he's infinite justice as well, and infinite truth. We could go on. And I just wanted to share that thought. And here you go, Dan.
Sounds good. A couple things for you guys, because we talk about addiction a lot, right? And in this generation, there's addiction more than ever. It's beyond just like meth, fentanyl, heroin, even though here in Los Angeles we have a huge rise in these things. Something to consider, something I repeat constantly about my own program here in California. The institutions themselves are the problem. A major component of getting healthy is you cannot get healthy in the place that made you sick. So if you got sick in Los Angeles and you had people dealing you drugs of that nature, the moment you're out of a rehab center or even in a rehab center, you're just going to go back to all those friends, all those contacts, just go into the neighborhood mart in order to get the exact poison that ended you up in that exact spot. Secondly, there's super corrupt government funding that people are simply keeping addicts in these positions, equipping them to relapse so that they can maintain a full house of addicts and get a check from the government and or some sort of grant. And the things we need to be doing to combat this are A, stop destroying our city with putting the rehab and addictive centers in the middle of all of our clean homes and schools. All you do is make them dirty and disgusting and bring drug addicts and homeless people. My niece told me she came from school and she had seen a naked man just walk down the street, by an Orthodox Jewish school, private school with security guards in front, and her mom told her, just don't look, right? And it makes me really mad. It makes me very unhappy that stuff just gets away with, And we can combat this simply by telling people the truth, that this is what's going on in our institutions. If you want, it's been proven, things like this have been done in Panama, actually, where instead of putting the addiction and the sickness in the center of the city next to our schools and our churches and our temples and our businesses, ruining our lifestyle, we give people free things, we put it outside of the city, so it draws people out, like in Exodus, right? And that's been proven to work, but anything that's been proven to work, we will not do, okay? That is, by we, I mean the city of Los Angeles, California. And I was going to read earlier, right, the adherence to the law and how Abraham made it clear that my success comes from God, right? Like, we're a faith-based institution here. It's exactly why we don't get funding. That has nothing to do with separation between church and state and the Constitution. It has everything to do with the fact that the government can't have God-based institutions, because God-based institutions work. They heal people and they get better, and people give their glory to God, not to the state. Everything, it's just like a triangle. If you guys are familiar with the broken line in blueprints, is anybody here familiar with that? It's there, but we don't take it seriously at all. So think of a triangle: man, government at the top, woman, and then broken line between God, man and woman is God down here. That's the structure of our society. You want to get married, you go through the government. You want to get divorced, you go through the government. You want to separate, through the government. Everything through the government. But through God, that's just an invisible line. It's not really there. It's not binding at all. And I wanted to quote what Abraham said, since I had some extra time. Fortunately, Chris is not feeling too good. Abraham said to the king of Sodom, "I lift up my hand to Yahweh, God the Most High, maker of heaven and earth, if so much as a thread to a shoe strap, or if I shall take from anything of yours, so you shall say, it is I who made Abraham rich. Far from me, only what the young men have eaten, and the share of the men who accompanied me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, they will take their portion." The last thing that I can tie in to what Israel was saying about dealing with addictive behaviors, I myself am somebody who's had to deal with addiction. And I wasn't necessarily aware of it, as most people aren't aware of their addictive behaviors. But it's an unfortunate thing that I've actually allowed myself to experience shame for. But I used to watch pornography constantly because it was just readily available for me on the internet. I was a young child who obviously wasn't sharing that that's what he was doing on the internet. And then as a habitual behavior, it was frequent between the ages of 12 and 16 for myself personally. And then it was completely intermittent, as in not used often, but still there for like 9 years beyond that. And then it's been completely gone for about 2 years, basically since I completely committed my life to God. I became a rabbi. I opened up businesses. I teach people how to handle addiction. And I know that my intention to recover from this thing that kept me down is actually what led me on this path. But God is the entry point. God is also the exit point for everything. And so I share my own story with you, and I have 7 things that I wrote down on my whiteboard that I think will help a lot of men if they're going to be watching this. And so due to Israel saying, call it out. Choose discipline when I'm hurting. That's 1. 2, I don't seek arousal outside of my wife/future wife. So this is for people who have women and or men who don't have women, because that is definitely inhibiting your ability to have a proper intimate relationship and a long-term one for that sake. This is not lust. This is pain, loneliness, and stress. So label it. Let it know what it is. It's not actual lust, right? It's literally pixels on a computer screen. I am a man who does not consume sexual images. My eyes are discipline. God, I release control. I trust you with my body and my future. Let me rest. And 7, my future is worth it. So remember, your future is worth it. Keep striving, guys. If you like those 7 rules, let me know. I've given them to a couple people. It's a bit beyond, of course, just addiction in the pornography sense, but addiction to other things as well. So I wanted to at least open that door, because I do tons of inventory for other people. It's a serious issue in the modern day, one that I can't not talk about anymore. Unfortunately, 90% of men watch pornography, making it a major, major issue in the world. And I think people in that space should allow themselves to experience some shame. It's healthy. Only honorable people can experience shame. So allow yourself to have it, and God will take you out of that pit if you just adhere to him.